Hello and welcome to another episode of Texas River Legends. In this episode, I'm going to be breaking down fly rod weights and fly line sizes. So in fly fishing, everything as far as sizes go is measured in weights. So we have a basically 1 through, we'll call it 15 weight. They go higher, but a 1 through 15 weight fly rods and 1 through 15 weight. It really isn't that complicated, but it can be a little bit tricky to grasp. Basically, the weight term in fly fishing just means the size or the strength or essentially the action. So if we're looking at the weight as far as fly rods go, the fly rod weight is basically its action. So on a conventional fishing rod, it would be rated in a either ultralight, light, medium, heavy, heavy action, all the way up to the broomstick. So its action is rated in medium, light, those types of terms. In fly rods, the action is rated in weights. So this here is a 5-weight fly rod, as you can see, and it's got a pretty lightweight action. This is kind of a mid-range fly rod. On the lighter side of the mid-range fly rod, you can compare it to a light action spinning rod. So you can see that the weight really just means the action. Number in front of the word weight on a fly rod pretty much just tells you the action of the fly rod, because the different numbers have different actions. The smaller the number, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weights, those are the lighter action fly rods. The bigger the number, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 weights, those are all the heavier action fly rods. The smaller the number, the lighter the action of the fly rod is, the bigger the number, the heavier the action. You can see this is an 8 weight, and you can see it's substantially thicker, and it is not as much of a broomstick. It also has a fighting butt because it is a heavier action fly rod. So the weight as far as fly rods go has nothing to do with how much they weigh. It is quite literally just the action of the fly rod. And the smaller the number, the lighter the action, the bigger the number, the heavier the action. So on that note, a good rod weight to start out with can really vary depending on what you're going to fish for. If you're doing mostly freshwater fishing in rivers, ponds, and maybe some lighter weight lake fishing, a 5 or 6 weight would be good to go with. You can really choose between those two based on what you're going to fish for more. If you're going to go more for bigger trout and bass and a little bit chunkier fish, a 6 weight would be better for you because it can do the small stuff, but it'll work a little bit better for the bigger things you hook into. If you're going to go for more, maybe smaller bass, smaller trout, more panfish and things like that might range in a little bit smaller size, you want to go with probably a 5 weight, but a 5 to 6 weight being essentially comparable to a light action and medium action spinning rod as far as action goes would be a good place to start. So the weight as far as fly rods go defines its action. What about weights on fly reels? Now, you may have heard that in fly fishing the reel isn't very important. You may have heard that this is just a device to store line, and that is true to a certain degree. So a fly reel, its purpose really is to store the line because as you know, we retrieve the line to work the lure, and we also cast and everything, holding the line in our hands. We don't really do a lot of reeling in fly fishing. But once you start getting into bigger fish, like if you're going for bass, not typically, but if you were to hook into a big bass or a big fish on a lightweight fly rod, or if you're going for more ocean things, carp fly fishing, bigger things that are going to fight harder, you're going to start getting into fighting the fish on the reel, which is basically where the fish pulls out all the extra line you have, and you're fighting it on the reel, reeling it in, and then the fish pulls line out. Now, fly reels don't really have a drag system like a spinning rod does, because the spool is what has the handle on it. So you turn the spool to reel it in, and you're just directly reeling line in, and when a fish pulls, that line comes out. However, there's 2 different types of reels. You have a click and pawl reel, which is basically a reel that has no drag system whatsoever, just a pair of clickers to make this sound. And you have what's called a disc drag fly reel. Now, most fly reels are disc drag fly reels, so they have a little bit of a drag you can adjust. As you can see, there's a dial on the back here. That kind of configures the tension and how much drag is put on the fish. These are going to be 90% of the time what your fly reels are going to be, but I would recommend always getting disc drag fly reel. You can see here this is a 5-weight disc drag. You can actually see the difference in the spool size and the reel size there. But same thing, I'd go with a disc drag over a click and pawl unless you're like specifically going for small trout and little panfish. But even then, a disc drag is going to be good if you were to hook into something big. So that kind of explains, the whole drag mechanism of fly reels. But what does the weight mean in fly reels? Because fly reels don't have an action. Essentially, The rod is the most important part as far as the weights go, because the rod defines everything else. So the only reason a fly reel has a weight is it tells you the size and what rod it should be put on. Most fly reels are good in a range of between 2 to 3 different sizes. So you can see here, this is a Hobbs Creek fly reel, but it is a Hobbs Creek 7/8 weight. That means it's good for a 7 to 8 weight rod. I have mine on 8 weight, but I could put it on a 7 weight. And so the weight on the fly reel pretty much just tells you what size rod it should be used on, and pretty much the size of the fly reel. You can see these are what we call large arbor fly reels. Once again, most disc drag fly reels are large arbor fly reels. The arbor is basically the distance of the spool right here, and the arbor is what holds the line. It's essentially the spool. But as you can see, an 8 weight, 7/8 weight fly reel is much bigger than, I believe this is a 4/5 weight fly reel right here. So you can see this one holds more line and is a lot wider and a little bit more heavy than a smaller fly reel. So the weight really defines the size and what rod it should be good on. You wouldn't take a 5 weight and put it on an 8 weight. You wouldn't take an 8 weight and put it on a 5 weight. So the reason they vary in size is because, you know, with bigger fish and bigger gear, you're going to need more lines so you don't get spooled. And also, bigger fly lines have a thicker diameter because they are heavier. And so they are heavier because the rod requires more weight to load because it has a stiffer action. And so basically they need to be able to hold thicker line. So that's why they go up in size. But the weight on a fly reel pretty much just defines its size and what rod it should be put on. Moving on to the line. Now the line gets a little more intricate than the reel, but still fairly simple. Fly line is measured in a weight system, mostly to be matched to the rod. Now I'm not 100% sure if the weight system started with the fly line or started with the fly rod. I would guess the line because fly line does have a weight to it, as we addressed in the last episode. Check that up here in the cards. The fly line is actually, as we said, the weight that you cast, and you can see that it's pretty thick and it actually has some weight to it. Now, fly lines are measured in weight, in weights just like everything else in fly fishing, and basically defines the size and the thickness of the fly line, and once again what rod and reel it should go onto. So this is 8 weight fly line. You can see that it's pretty thick. You can see it's pretty thick, has a decent amount of weight to it. It's designed to cast and load a 8 weight fly rod. If you were to put it on a smaller rod, like a 6 to 5 weight, it would overload the rod and it'd be very hard to cast. If you were to put a lighter line, like a 5 weight line on an 8 weight fly rod, you wouldn't be able to load the rod and you wouldn't get the distance. So you have to match the size of the fly line to the fly rod, just like you did the reel to the rod. But that's really what the weight means in fly line. So really the numbers are there on the line so that you can match it to your rod. Now they are going to vary in thickness. You can see this is an 8 weight fly line. And over here we have a 5 weight fly line, and you can visibly see it is a little bit thinner. Hopefully you can see that. So basically, on lighter weight fly rods, you don't need as much weight in the line to be able to load the rod and get a good cast. So the fly lines are a little bit lighter weight, a little bit lighter, not as thick, and so you can cast them better on a lighter weight rod because they're designed for that. Basically, you want to match your fly line to your fly rod and your fly reel to your fly rod, and just make sure all the numbers are the same. So if you get a 5 weight fly rod, you want a reel that can go on a 5 weight fly rod, and you want 5 weight fly line. So the whole thing is balanced and functions as it's intended to. So really it's pretty simple. You know, all it means as far as the rod goes, the weight defines the action of the rod. The bigger the number, the heavier action the rod is. Stiffer it's going to be. The smaller the number, the lighter the action of the rod is. As far as the reel goes, it's pretty much just a number to help you match the size of the reel to the fly rod, because the bigger the number, the bigger the reel, the smaller the number, the smaller the reel, and the less line it can hold. And the fly line basically defines the thickness and the actual weight of the fly line, helps you match it to the right action of rod so you get a balanced outfit. It's really a simple thing to understand once you actually think about it. It can be kind of confusing because you got all these weights, you got the same measuring system on 3 different pieces of equipment, but the biggest thing is make sure you match your line, your reel, and your rod all together so you get a balanced outfit. So there you go, guys. That is a breakdown of what the weight system means in fly fishing. Hopefully that helped. If it did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.